She said that she needed to stop by at Myrtle Beach Funeral Home because she had left her glasses there earlier that day.
Was this after typical business hours at a funeral home?
It was late. It was dark, so it had to have been 9 o'clock or so.
How would you guys have gotten into the Myrtle Beach Funeral Home? If it's after hours?
With the key.
Who had a key?
The defendant definitely had one. I may have also had one. I had keys to some funeral homes, but not others. So we had at least one key with us, maybe two.
Okay. So the defendant says she has to get glasses. Did you, in fact, go to the funeral home?
We did.
Tell me about that. What happened?
So we went to the funeral home, and I assumed she was looking for her glasses. She went to the left. We walked in the back door of the building. She walked to the left, which is back toward where the embalming room is. I went straight up the hall toward the office. At some point, I heard her speaking, presumably on the phone. And then I heard the conversation end. She came to the office. When she got to the office, she had her cell phone out. And I was talking to her, and she wasn't looking up at me. Whatever was on her phone, she was very, had her attention. And she said, I have to go see Greg.
Did she say why she had to go see Greg?
She did not, but I said, well, I'm not going.
Why not? Why wouldn't you go?
Because she was constantly complaining about drama and abuse, and I didn't want to be part of it. She would typically take a friend with her. Her friend Savannah would go with her to Greg's house, or she would go on her own.
Is that based on what she told you, or did you actually witness her?
Based on what she told me.
Okay. So what
I didn't want to be caught up in drama.
What happened when you told her you weren't going to go?
She said she would just be a few minutes, just go with her.
What happened next?
So I drove her van. We drove toward Greg's apartment complex, which is off of Arrowhead Road.
Let me stop you there for a second. Did you know where Greg lived before this?
I knew where his apartment complex was. I had been there on death calls before, so I knew roughly, I forget what it was called now, but I knew how to get to the general area.
Did you ever require directions to get there?
No.
What? So I'm sorry, now continue. You headed in the direction of the victim.
We headed in the direction. She called Greg while we were driving, and I guess he had indicated to her that he was outside. She told me that she makes him meet her outside because she's uncomfortable going to his apartment. So he meets her outside of the apartment complex. So we were driving down Arrowhead Road, and I saw Greg on the left side of the road walking towards us, just outside of the apartment complex. And I said, is that him? She said, yeah. So as we approached him, I started to slow down, and she said, make a U-turn. So I kind of passed him, made a U-turn, and as I pulled up alongside him, she said, because he stopped walking, and he kind of turned to face our van, and I was stopping right next to him, and she said, pull up, don't be awkward. So I said, pull up. She said, yeah, pull up. So I pulled up so that we had passed him.
What happened next?
She opened the door and shot him.
How many shots did you hear?
A lot.
What did you do?
I froze.
Did the defendant say anything to you at that point?
Yeah. She said, what are you doing? Help me, help me. Cursing at me, help me.
So what did you do?
I got out of the van and walked toward the back of the van. Greg was laying right at the back of the van on the side of the road.
What did you do?
She said, put him in the back of the van. So I opened the back of the van and we started treating him just as we would treat any other body. And I grabbed the sheet, wrapped it up like a rope, put it underneath his torso to help with leverage. And then in her van, she had what we call I don't remember what we called it, like a sliding board. It was a black plastic backboard, and it was flexible so that you could put a body on it and easily slide it and maneuver it around. I pulled that off of her stretcher, and using the sheet as leverage, we both picked Greg up and put him on the sliding board and put him into the back of the van.
What did you do next?
I reached in and started buckling him. So on the mortuary stretchers that we put him on, there's 2 seat belts, and you click them, and what they do is they hold the body in place. And I started to do that, and she started screaming and cussing at me and said, what are you doing? We need to get out of here. We need to get out of here. And I shut the back door. Greg was just kind of haphazardly on the stretcher. He wasn't buckled on. He wasn't covered up. And we got in the van, and I hightailed it out of there.
How long would you say you were in the Arrowhead community?
Not long. I mean, it happened fast. And by the time when I pulled up in front of him, it was like one swift move. Like she opened the door, slid out, and it was pop, 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 pop.
Had the 2 of you moved bodies before together? You just have to say yes or no.
Yes.
Was as part of your jobs, was that a fairly frequent occurrence?
Yes, every day.
So you said that you hightailed it out of the Arrowhead community. Where did you go?
We went back to the funeral home.
What happened when you got there?
Well, first of all, on the way there, I asked her, what just happened? Why did you do that? And she didn't say much. She told me to go to the funeral home. And I just remember the complete nonchalance. Just like this, it was like a minor inconvenience that we were going through.
So what happened once you got back to the funeral home?
So at the funeral home, when you bring a body in, they have a garage and they have coolers in the garage, and the coolers have one door that you open, and there's either 3 or 4 shelves inside the door. And wheeled Greg in on stretcher. I made a cremation container, which is pretty much a glorified cardboard box. And you use little zip ties to tie it up and make it rigid. And I made one just like we would make for anybody else. And I put it into the cooler and pushed the stretcher up next to it and started to push Greg in. And the whole time she was yelling, "Are you stupid? Are you stupid? Hurry up. We got to get out of here. Hurry up. Are you stupid?" Over and over again, "Are you stupid?"
Did you have any concerns about leaving the victim in a cooler and leaving the funeral home?
I put a So sometimes the coroner's office will use funeral homes as extra storage, like if we're out of room at the morgue in Conway, or if it's, for whatever reason, we might need to leave a body in a funeral home. And typically we put a note on the shelf that the body's on. It just says hold for coroner, and that's what I did. I put a note on it that said hold for coroner.
Would that have been unusual? A note, hold for coroner?
No, that was a regular thing.
During this time that you're taking Greg out of the van and loading him into the cooler, were you able to see him? Was there a lot of blood?
So the night that we put him in,
Yes, the night he was killed.
I did not look. I had draped a sheet across him when we brought him in from the van, and I just pushed him in like he was. Now the next night, I saw him.
Okay,
And
I'll get to that in just a minute.
Okay.
So after you put Greg in the cooler, what did you guys do?
Got out of there fast and went back to her house.
Did you go back to...
I'm sorry.
Go
Yeah.
ahead.
On the way back to her house, we had to get my Explorer from Abuelo's. So we stopped to get my Explorer before we went back to her house. On the way to get the Explorer, she told me that if I ever told anybody what happened, she would kill me. And that we have to be in this together. She told me that I have to stay with her that night. I better not leave her. And then we went, got my Explorer. We went to Lowe's food store, International Drive, and I can't remember which vehicle we left there, but we left one of the vehicles in the parking lot of the Lowe's food store. And
So
took
your
the other
Explorer
two.
was still at Abuelo's, but you went and picked it up and went to Lowe's? I'm just trying to get that.
Correct, yes.
Where did you go after that?
We went to Megan's house.
Okay. So at some point, did you go back to the funeral home that night?
We did.
Why?
So I got to backtrack and tell you background. When we got back to her house, her daughter, Savannah, was watching TV in the living room. And I just remember thinking how normal it looked in the house, and I had to pretend that this hadn't just happened. I'm sorry. Megan went straight to the shower, and I sat on the couch with Savannah. I'm sorry, Savannah.
Okay, you just have to answer my question.
I'm sorry. Sat on the couch with her. And I tried to make small talk. Like I hadn't just watched her mother kill her father. I'm sorry, what was the question?
You said you would return to the funeral home at some point that night. So you got back to Megan's house, she's upstairs taking a shower, you're on the couch with Savannah, what happened next?
Okay, so there's an app that we use for the coroner's office called Iris.
Is that
And
IRIS?
I believe it's IRISS.
Okay, thank you. So there's an app. What?
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So the IRIS app, it tells you what's going on in the county. Only law enforcement, fire, rescue, coroners have access to it. And I remember seeing on that app that there was what appeared to be a pending death on the south end of town. It said it was a cardiac arrest. The call came in as a cardiac arrest. I believe it was a man that was found down in his driveway. And I told the defendant after she got out of the shower about that call. I said, it looks like there's going to be a death call. Looked at the map on my phone at the river at the county line, and I decided to head out 378. So I drove out 378, and there wasn't much traffic, but as I got close to the county line, there was a car that had flown up behind me, and I pulled into a little convenience store about a mile or so before the county line, and I let that car pass. And then I continued out toward the river. When I got there, I actually drove across the bridge, and after you cross the bridge into Marion County, there's a sharp bend, I believe, to the right in the road. After that bend, you can see ahead for a long ways. And I made sure that there was no oncoming cars, so that nobody was going to pull up on me while I was doing what I was doing. And once I knew there were no cars coming, I did a U-turn. I went back to the middle of the bridge, and I popped the back gate of the Explorer. It took about 10 seconds to put them in the water.
What did you do after that?
Went back to the defendant's house.
Was there any conversation at that point about getting rid of, had you done that?
I came in, and she smiled at me and said, "Did you do what you need to do? What you needed to do?" I said, "Yes," and she said, "Good boy."
Let me just back up on something. Do you know what happened to the gun the defendant used? Did she ever tell you what she did?
She told me that she put it in the intercoastal waterway off of International Drive, along with shell casings and I believe some of his other personal effects.
Okay. At some point, did the two of you kind of strategize about what to tell the police if they ever questioned you?
Yeah. So I got a call from Greg Lent with Horry County Police asking me to come in to talk about Greg Rice's disappearance. At this point, he hadn't been found. So I told the defendant that I got that call, at which point she started drumming up this whole story about what we were going to tell him. And that's what we went with, and it was not true at all.
Is that the story you repeated to the police
Yes.
time and time again before your arrest?
Yes, I felt like I had no choice.
At some point, did you decide to tell the truth about what happened?
I did.
And what spurred that decision? made you decide to tell the truth?
Well, the first conversation I had with my lawyer, I told her what I was guilty of, and I said, I will plead to that now and I'll tell the whole truth. But I want my family to be protected, because as soon as it came